Singer-songwriter Oliver Anthony's populist anthem, Men North of Richmond, went viral over the weekend, causing strong reactions from both conservatives and some progressives. Let's listen to some of the song.
I've been selling my soul, working all day, overtime hours for bull pay, so I can sit out here and waste my life away, drag back home and drown my troubles away. It's a damn shame what the world's gotten to for people like me, people like you. Wish I could just wake up and it not be true, but it is. Oh, it is living in the new world with an whole soul. These rich men north of Richmond, Lord knows they all just wanna have total control. Wanna know what you think, wanna know what you do, and they don't think you know, but I know that you do, 'cause your dollar ain't and it's taxed to no end, 'cause the rich men north of Richmond.
Conservative commentator Matt Walsh tweeted in reaction, "The main reason this song resonates with so many people isn't political. It's because the song is raw and authentic. We are suffocating by artificiality. Everything around us is fake. A guy in the woods pouring his heart over his guitar is real." While Connecticut Democrat Chris Murphy posted, I think progressives should listen to this in part because it's just a good tune, B, but also because it shows the path of realignment. Anthony sings about the soullessness of work, bad wages, and the power of the elites, all problems the left has better solutions to than the right.
And some people were upset with Chris Murphy about this. Look, I think that it is both true. It is also something, I'm sorry, that the left, represented by people like Bernie Sanders, have been arguing for years, and not with the support, at least in terms of electoral support, of people like Chris Murphy.
Have people like Bernie Sanders been arguing for lower taxes?
For the poor, yes. Absolutely.
Well, so are Republicans.
So
we all want lower taxes.
Here's what's
want zero
so
taxes.
interesting. So I was looking this up. Apparently, I'm now losing my tab. But something like 40% of Americans, who really are the poor people who are working double time shifts and all of these kinds of things, make too little money to actually have to pay income tax. So if we're really talking about the most down and out poor Americans, they're actually too poor to actually be paying income taxes at all.
They don't pay taxes.
Moreover, part of it, and Republicans historically have castigated those people as folks who don't deserve any political power because they aren't contributing to society. Now, on the other hand, progressives have been saying that the tax rates have shifted radically in favor of the rich since the 1960s. And you can see this on any chart. I don't know if we have this graphic yet. But back in the 1950s and 60s, the halcyon years that so many Republicans harken back to fondly, the wealthy paid vastly higher tax rates than the middle class or the poor. But since then, taxes that hit the wealthiest the hardest, like the estate and corporate taxes, have plummeted, while tax avoidance has become increasingly more common. And this is part of why we had this discourse over the last year as to whether or not you needed to empower the IRS to be able to go after the more complicated, high-profile, elite tax crimes instead of doing what they do now, which is because of cuts over the last 10 years, focusing very wrongly on the easiest cases, the poorest cases, so that the most audited city in America is one of the poorest cities in America, in the middle of Mississippi.
Well, sure, but I'm not. When I hear that song, by the way, I should say obviously it's not really my kind of music, but I think it has a lot of artistic merit. I see why it's going viral. It's
sure.
A compelling performance. He's not mad that top marginal tax rate isn't higher, that the corporate tax isn't higher.
He's mad that we don't know why he's mad.
No, he's mad that his taxes are too high and that he is paying too much taxes to Washington. That's what he's mad about. He wants his taxes reduced, which is a plan I absolutely agree with and condone, and Republicans should too. And I don't know how Democrats feel about it, but we should shrink people like that. We should shrink their tax obligation for sure.
So I certainly do agree to the extent that he has a high tax obligation, which we don't know at all.
So this was an interesting. I should have forwarded this to you. This is a Substack of Noah Smith, who's an economist. He looked up what the average wage for a manufacturer. Ostensibly, that's the work that this individual does. So it would be about $49,000 a year. And then the tax
Average.
rate for there would drop that down to about 30-something, maybe it's 36,000. Where is it in here? Maybe it's 39,000. It's somewhere in that ballpark a year, which is not a lot of money. Because it's like about 24% tax rate or so.
And what's so frustrating?
Which is about what the rich pay too.
Well, that's exactly the problem. What's so frustrating is that while the rich historically have had to pay a lot more, and the reason being that we understand that there's a baseline amount of money that you need to live and eat and put food over your head. And so people who are closer to that baseline shouldn't have to pay as large a chunk of their income to sustain themselves. The overall tax rate on the richest 400 households in America last year, this article was written in 2019, so in 2018, was only 23%, meaning that their combined tax payments equaled less than 1/4 of their total income. This overall rate was 70% in 1950 and 47% in 1980.
I mean,
so what
those
we have,
rates seem insane to me.
Well,
but
people in this context who sing songs like this and talk about a better America in yesteryear are always talking about this exact time period in the 1950s and the 1960s where they felt like they had a better standard of living. And they're not wrong. Back then, the average gap between CEO pay and worker pay was 30-1. Now it's well over 300-1.
The gap is not what they're mad about. They're mad about their absolute position.
Well, where do you think the millionaires and billionaires are getting their money from? They're stolen wages that they increasingly can extract from working populations by suppressing unions. We also had much higher union density back then, so that workers don't have the ability to negotiate the terms of their contracts. We have a president right now who just suppressed what would have been one of the largest labor strikes in American history, and who's crowing that he is a pro-labor president even as he does that. And the reality is that workers are getting less of the piece of their pie, getting less of the benefits of the fruits of their labor, at the same time that the wealthier people are being taxed at a lower rate, and they're paying less into the social benefits that we all could be enjoying.
But the idea is to make a bigger pie, right, and get more, maybe you're getting a larger share of the pie, but you're getting more relative pie.
Well, Americans
That's what people care about.
become more productive. Americans are more productive than they were in the 1950s, but they're earning less.
It's not a zero-sum game, like that there's a finite amount of
But it is a zero-sum
wealth.
game. What do you mean it's not a zero-sum game? Americans
you just
work
conceded
hard.
that it wasn't.
No, absolutely not. Americans work hard. They become increasingly productive. Technology means that there's increasing productivity. But instead of passing on the benefits of that labor onto the American worker, and instead of reinvesting in their businesses, this was a big issue with the airline shutdown over the holidays. Instead of reinvesting in the technology that would make life better for consumers and passengers, they instead pay out stock dividends, make the rich richer. The rich don't have to pay taxes to support a healthcare system, social welfare state, roads and bridges, or anything like that, even though their companies would not be able to exist if the state weren't taking care of the health of their workers, if the state weren't taking care of the roads, and the people at the bottom are getting less and less and less. That's literally what's happening. So this man is not wrong. The question is, what do the people who listen to him perceive to be as the cure to these kinds of issues? What Republicans have done historically is say, okay, little guy, we're going to cut your taxes a little tiny bit, at the same time that I cut my rich person taxes enormously. That's literally what Donald Trump did with the 2017 tax cuts.
I mean, that's the difference between a populist left and a populist right. It's not the frustration about the inequality and just how much money the wealthy are making. Again, if it's being made illegitimately, if it's being made through subsidies or some kind of...
No, it's being made legitimately. It's being stolen, I would argue, from the people who made it because they don't have any power.
It's just a philosophical difference.
Well,
it's their money. It's your money. You should keep as much of it as you possibly can.
It can be tested.
And this person doesn't... The people in the situation of the singer don't get to keep enough of their money, and we absolutely want them to be able to keep more.
So it can be tested.
And we want a good economic situation where it's easy to find jobs, easy to get better jobs. There can be upward mobility. There are problems in the community being dealt with. That's the right answer to these. The right answer among the right to these problems.
That's a good way to frame this, because some people. There was one viral tweet where someone said, "Well, what's the left's answer to this?" And people had a lot of joking responses,
liquidating the billionaires,
pointing to the fact that we have people like Bob Dylan and other folk singers who have been speaking about these exact economic issues. What's his name? The Boss. New Jersey. Bruce Springsteen. People like that have had working class narratives that have been enormously popular for years, and who point to things like the value of worker solidarity and union work as the way to actually better the situation of the people, of these sorts of people.
Well, I don't have any problem with unions for people can join unions and start unions. That's fine.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, if you know you're working hard and you know the value of your labor, and you're not getting it, you cannot ask the boss for more money. And it's not how, you cannot ask. They're not going to give it to you because they have the power, and they have the power to fire you and replace you if you cause too much trouble. And so one worker standing on their own does not have any power against a wealthy boss management class. The only power that workers have is union solidarity. And I think that's part of why we're seeing a spike in union actions across the country, not just with the writer strike out in Hollywood, the teacher strikes over the last few years, Starbucks workers unionizing across the country, Amazon workers having enormous successes, unprecedented successes just last year. And so people are coming around to it. So I say I applaud this song, but there's another piece of this that is a little bit troubling, which is that there is a concern that the success of this gentleman, while I think his message in large part is legitimate, there are some parts of the song that I think are worth looking at from a lyric perspective. You know, why, if you're an advocate for the poor and working class, do you have a line like, well, God, if you're 5'3" and you're 300 pounds, taxes ought not to pay for your bag of fudge rounds? That doesn't sound especially populist to me, especially when a state like West Virginia has the worst health care in the entire country with a 40.7% obesity rate. You know, are you for the people of West Virginia, or do you deride and look down your nose at people who are in a horrible healthcare void, who have terrible access to quality food, and who are obese and poor and drug addicted and
I can't speak for this person, but a lot of people on the, I mean, as you described earlier, because the very poorest are not paying any taxes at all, and there's some resentment there of that
the people are too poor to pay taxes. Well,
I mean, this person could be. Is poor, pays taxes, and is poorer than they would be otherwise. Well, paying taxes to support the people who don't have any. What is, you know, I mean, this is a conservative view, but what are the people in that situation doing to improve their station so that they're not just, so that they can survive on their own over time?
Well, if your attitude toward human nature is that they must not be doing anything because they enjoy being poor, or they're bad people who don't deserve life-sustaining sustenance, that's a position that you can have. I don't know how many people want to sing songs or feel solidarity or join arms in a sense of community over my neighbor is lazy and deserves what they got. But if that's what this guy means, and that's what this guy means.
I just say people hit a point where they say it's not that they're lazy and they deserve what they got, but they don't deserve what I got. They don't deserve what I make, what I earn to feed myself, and they get part of that.
Well, they don't. They're on welfare and scraping by.
But welfare
and
is paid for by taxpayers.
Right. Someone on welfare does not have what someone who has an average American salary and who can afford an average American life without having to go on health care has. They fundamentally don't have the same thing. And why are we judging our life and ourselves on the basis of our neighbor's suffering?
It's not judgment. It's entitlement to what you have.
If you think that in the United States of America, people should die of starvation and die because of exposure to the elements, like so many homeless people do every year, and die because they don't have access to health care and get preventable illnesses, but they die on the street because they're too poor to get that, then that's a position that someone can have. It's a free country. You're allowed to have that position. But we decided 80 years ago in this country, in the New Deal era, that was not the kind of country we wanted to be. And we were enormously proud of ourselves for ending the scourge of elder poverty and old people just lying in the street and dying because we didn't have something like Social Security, a mandatory saving programs that would take care of our elderly, and that we didn't have Medicare, and that we didn't have Medicaid.
Now we have an enormous transfer of the wealth of young people to older people to keep them, they're wealthier and more powerful than they've ever been. They run our entire government and our entire society.
I don't know what specific policy you're speaking to there. Are you advocating for cutting Medicare and Social Security?
I would cut them, sure.
Right. Well, you're entitled to that view, but that view is very contrary to what the majority of Americans, including most Republicans, want, because they have felt what it is to have the benefit of those programs for dozens of years, decades
programs
and decades
that won't be are predicted not to be solvent by the time where they're never going to pay out what we're putting into them.
And they know they wouldn't be able to survive without them. So the question is, I completely understand and resonate with the idea that you don't like where your taxes are going. I don't like billions of dollars being spent on endless war, but there's two problems here. One is that people have a wrong understanding of how the relationship between taxes and spending, so that they believe that we actually do have to tax to support these kind of programs. Modern monetary theory disproves that. I think a lot of what we saw during the financial crisis disproves that. But I'm not interested. We don't have the time right now to have a lengthy
Modern
conversation
monetary
about
theory is one theory. There are a lot of
theory.
theories,
But the more important point is that if you want our tax dollars to be spent differently, if you want, for instance, for us to join the rest of the developed world and pay less for our health care and have it to be guaranteed regardless of if you skip a premium. There are no premiums. There are no deductibles. There is a healthcare system that you go in and you get care regardless of how much money you have in the bank without even showing anything, ID card or anything. We could have that for less than what we're paying right now in terms of your healthcare premiums and deductibles, if we use our tax dollars to support a universal Medicare for all system like every other country in the world. And I think that people would have a very different feeling about their taxes. In Scandinavia, they'll be getting taxed most of their paycheck, but feel like at the end of the day, free education that's guaranteed, that's high quality for their kids, free healthcare that's guaranteed is worth it because they feel like they're getting something out of it. And in America, we have the worst of all worlds, where people are feeling overtaxed,
the worst of all worlds,
and they're not getting anything in the bargain.
But I don't think there's the amount of... It's difficult for me to imagine the amount of social trust or respect or to have we don't have the kind of homogenous society that European
I don't think you need to
countries
have racial homogeny to have respect for people.
Not just racial, but political. I mean, this is such a polarized country. There's so much anger and resentment over the red and blue culture, red and blue everything.
Well,
I have a hard time. I mean, this is a large, diverse place, and I don't just mean racially, but in terms of what people value and want.
In our political system, I would argue their entire agenda is ensuring that people believe there's all these differences between us, when I think, in fact, various populist revolutions have illustrated that they're not. So I have a lot of empathy for the sentiment that's expressed in this song. I think that people should consider what it looks like to have a solidarity movement to try to work together to cure some of the ails that this man, I think, rightly points out exist. And I think that we need to start in the position of believing that a better America and a better world is possible, or else are we in fact just playing into the divisiveness that ensures that we say, I hate you because you're playing a banjo, or I hate you because you're listening to hip hop, instead of working together and realizing that all of us are working very hard in the most productive, wealthiest nation in the history of the world. And despite all of our hard work and knowing that we're all striving to make the world a better place and our lives a better place and to support our children and our families, we're not getting the benefit of that bargain. And is it really this guy's fault? Is it your neighbor down the street's fault? Is it some overweight, 300-pound, 5'3" woman, as he points to in the song?
Well, but he's blaming D.C. He's blaming our government.
Yeah, and I think that's the right place. And it's a bipartisan corporate oligarchy that is causing these kinds of problems.
We'll have more Rising right after this.